A pawb, croeso I lansiad Coleg y Gyfodol ar gyfer Cymru. And for those of you who don't speak Welsh, don't be worried. I'm not going to do the whole of this event in Welsh, but I'm proudly Welsh, and this is the launch of the Welsh event today. Adroddiad terfynol cenedlaethol Cymru sy'n deillio waith y Comisiwn Annibynnol ar Coleg y Gyfodol. Today we've launched the Welsh nation-specific report that comes out of the work of the Commission for the College of the Future. I'd like to just add one point to start with. Ordinarily, we would have offered simultaneous translation this afternoon, but it just hasn't been possible to do that. So, ymddiheuriadau, mae'n ddrwg gen I am hynna. Ond os mae unrhyw un isig gofyn unrhyw gwestiwn yn Gymraeg ar y chat yn ystod y sesiwn yma, gwnewch hynna efo croeso a na I gyfieithu. So I was just making the point that we would ordinarily offer simultaneous Welsh-English language translation facilities. We just have not been able to do that this afternoon. We're really sorry. But if anybody wishes to make a contribution in the second part when we do the Q&A through the medium of Welsh, then please do so, and I'll be more than happy to do my very best to translate with my combination of North Walian and Cardiganshire Welsh that I've grown over almost 60 years. Anyway, okay, so really quickly, I think a number of you hopefully know me. I'm David Jones. I used to be the Principal Chief Executive at Deeside College, then worked with a team that created Coleg Cambria and stood down just over a year ago. And I can't see you, but hopefully around 175 participants can see us this afternoon. And I'm really delighted to see that we've got a really good audience this afternoon, and many past and present colleagues are there. So pnawn da I chi gyd, mae'n neis I gweld chi gyd. O, dim gweld chi gyd, mae'n neis fod chi'n gallu gweld fi a fod chi yma efo ni pnawn yma. A few bits around housekeeping to start with. Other than the people you can see on the screen, everybody else have their cameras turned off and mics muted throughout the webinar. Any questions you have, and you can come up with them now if you want, but certainly in the second half of this session, please can you give them to us through the chat function. And then finally, in terms of housekeeping, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Commission's website in the coming days. So a little bit of background to start with on how we've ended up here. Back in around about 2018, the four nations of the UK, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland and England, got together from a college perspective, very much encouraged by the government education departments and by the various associations of colleges that exist in those countries. I think it's fair to say that for many years there hadn't been a lot of working between the colleges since devolution. People were very much working independently, and quite rightly people were feeling that there was an opportunity to come together to share good practice, lots of good things going on across the UK, but also to share some of the emerging challenges. So as a result of that first meeting, which I was one of the people who were at it alongside a number of other people who I think were on this session this afternoon, which took place in Belfast, about a year later, just decided that a commission should be established in order to look at the concept of the College of the Future. And that was kicked off in the spring of 2019. And from a Welsh perspective, it was very much supported by ColegauCymru, Colleges Wales. And I just want to thank a couple of people who I think we may have on this afternoon. In those early days, Claire Roberts, who's now a colleague at Qualifications Wales. And since then, massive thank you to Rachel Bowen and to Iestyn Davies, and also to the current chair of Colleges Wales, Guy Lacey, who's one of our speakers this afternoon, and his predecessor, David Evans, for your support as well. The aim of the commission was to answer two questions, which were, what do we want and need from colleges from 2030 onwards? And secondly, how do we get there? So it was very much a four nations approach and very much a partnership of equals, regardless of the relative size of the different countries. And there were around about 20 people on the commission. And in terms of people based in Wales, there were two of us. So myself and also Rob Humphreys, who I think is also joining us this afternoon. And congratulations, Rob, on your recent appointment as the interim chair of HEFCU. The commission was chaired by Ian Diamond, and I think Ian's also in on this session this afternoon. Good afternoon, pnawn da, Ian, if you can hear me. And of course, in Wales, we know Ian quite well from the Diamond Review of HE. And then in terms of commissioners were with us, and I will introduce her more fully shortly, also Ellen Hazelkorn as well was a commissioner. I think importantly, in terms of the commission, it was not dominated by the views of college insiders. Yes, there were representatives of colleges from right across the 4 nations, but it very much felt to me like it was about what other people felt and needed colleges to do. And I think that's been an important part of driving the reports that we now have in front of us. It's really important that I thank the partners who supported the work of the Commission. Notably, I mentioned them once already, but I'll do it again, ColegauCymru, the Association of Colleges, City and Guilds, Colleges Scotland, FETL, JISC, the Open College Network, NCFE and Pearson. The Commission has worked hard to build a consensus around a vision for the future of colleges. There have literally been hundreds of meetings, seminars and conversations with our key stakeholders, learners, employers and staff, and right across the college sector, business, trade unions, universities, academia, student voice, governments and beyond. There are clearly many examples of leading and best practice and innovation in all parts of the UK. No one country had all the answers, as well, no country is perfect. And of course, there are many areas for development and improvement right across the UK. This report's publication is timely. Business faces significant challenges and unfortunately, building on bad results today already, unemployment is expected to rise even further after the furlough period ends. At the same time, we still face big trends like the 4th Industrial Revolution, climate change and an ageing population. These are all opportunities, challenging opportunities. We need to grasp them. Retraining and equipping people at all stages of their careers and lives is vital to ensure everyone has the right skills as, for example, we move to a zero carbon economy. The Commission's vision, this is the overarching UK vision, focuses on 3 Ps: people, productivity and place. The College of the Future will empower people throughout their lives with the skills they need to get on in life, support better productivity and innovation of businesses, and strengthen every community's sense of place. In October, the Commission set out its recommendations for achieving this across the UK with broad principles. Separate, more focused reports are being produced for Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland and England. In Wales, our considerations have included the future of tertiary education and an important agenda around the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. We know that colleges will be central to post-COVID recovery plans and to securing a progressive, sustainable and prosperous Wales for future generations. The restructuring of the college system in Wales through previous reforms over the last 15 years or so in particular means that colleges in Wales are well placed to build on much good practice, to increasingly support people, increase productivity and strengthen communities. There are 100 days from today until the scheduled date of the Senedd elections. I qualify that because we know they may not take place. Today's report calls for Wales's current policy trajectory of collaboration across education and with business and regions in Wales to go further, to ensure that colleges are empowered, resourced, and just as importantly, challenged to drive what the future of Wales and the world will need. Right, that's more than enough from me as a way of introduction. As I said, we have a number of speakers this afternoon. I'm really delighted at who we have this afternoon. We have my fellow Commissioner, Ellen Hazelkorn, of course, we know her from Hazelkorn Review of Oversight of Post-Compulsory Education in Wales, and she will give a quick overview of the key recommendations. Then we're delighted to be joined by Kathryn Roberts, the current chair of CBI Wales, Croeso Pnawn Kathryn, who will share her reflections on the report from a business perspective. Then we have Shavanah Taj, General Secretary Wales TUC, who will provide a response from the trade union perspective. And last but not least, finally, my colleague, ex-colleague Guy Lacey, the Principal and Chief Executive of Coleg Gwent and the Chair of ColegauCymru, who will reflect on the recommendations from the perspective of a college leader. We'll then hopefully have plenty of time to put questions to our panel, so please do use the chat functions to make your comments. Okay, without further ado, I'll hand over to Ellen. Pnawn da, good afternoon, Ellen.
Hi, David. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I want to follow on with David's comments about this is a really timely report at a very critical juncture for all of us. Certainly for me, where I sit in Dublin, we're in another long lockdown, and the implications of that are huge. But so also hyper-globalization, the climate change, technological revolution, plus the changes, as I've said, coming from COVID-19 and from Brexit, are reshaping and will continue to reshape the world of work and how and where we live. Demographic changes mean that lifelong learning is no longer an option, but is an essential for economic, social, and personal development. Failure to respond appropriately to these many challenges, or indeed opportunities, has arguably incited social and political discord across many countries, along with growing levels of distrust in public and civic institutions. A growing sense of inequity or inequality is undermining trust around the world. The UNESCO Global Education 2030 Agenda recognizes that higher education plays a major role in social, cultural, and economic development. It says education is both a goal in itself and a means for attaining all other SDGs. The Future Generations Act is a really important development here in Wales, and it likewise recognizes that a more sustainable, resilient, healthier, equal, globally responsible, and culturally and economically prosperous Wales is linked to a skilled and educated population and to a society that maximizes people's physical and mental well-being. But it's always important to note that the benefits of education are not just limited to the people or the students, but extend across society as a whole. And equally notably, the emphasis on skills should be matched by a growing understanding that people will require and do require a wider range of competencies. Technical skills alone will not be sufficient in this rapidly changing world. The College of the Future for Wales report calls for a new vision for colleges. It says the College of the Future will empower people throughout their lives with the skills they need to get on in life, support better productivity and innovation of businesses, and strengthen every community's sense of purpose, sense of place and purpose. So just to point out a few key recommendations. One, creating a national vision for skills and lifelong learning and making it a reality through a holistic, coherent, and equitable post-compulsory education and training system underpinned by a single funding and regulatory body. Two, tackling inequalities and delivering for people of all ages by establishing a statutory right to lifelong learning to ensure quality for education for all, with cost never being a barrier to upskilling and retraining, and particularly as learners, enabling learners to navigate and access support where they need it. Third, ensuring colleges are recognized as anchor institutions and empowered to collaborate to support their communities to thrive by establishing a legal duty and governing bodies to consider regional needs, and colleges being represented on public service boards and in the delivery of Future Generations Act. Fourth, strategically supporting businesses with skills and innovation by coordinating sector or occupation-focused support through employer hubs, with colleges convening strategic support to employers, sole traders, and entrepreneurs. Crucially, this means the workforce development and continuous professional development opportunities. Fifth, driving digital transformation of the college network and the wider Welsh society and economy through the creation of digital community hubs in colleges and funding digital learning and infrastructure. So what does this actually mean for colleges? And how do we see the role of colleges in the future and what are its responsibilities? So for us and for me, it's about providing education and training opportunities for all learners. Note I use the word learner to represent the fact that we're talking about people across the age profile. not just the traditional student. So of all learners of all abilities and circumstances over their lifetime, creating greater porosity between colleges and universities to enable learners to take advantage of opportunities as the changes take place in the marketplace and their circumstances. And certainly from my point of view, getting rid of moving beyond predatory practices between colleges and universities. Playing a more direct and dynamic role in the innovation ecosystem through collaboration between colleges, local authorities, schools, I think are an important component, business and enterprise, and civic and cultural organizations. Building and generating absorptive capacity by helping people apply and synthesize their knowledge across all sectors, all technological areas, and helping to renew competences in traditional sectors. Developing a strategic and place-based approach to curriculum design and to partnerships, adding value to the local and regional communities through developing programs and relationships which build on local expertise, products, and needs. It means involving new teaching and learning pedagogies and using technology both in the classroom and into the community, much more cooperative and much more co-production of knowledge. Having a social responsibility and working with disadvantaged communities to help reach their full potential and contribute skills, energy, and commitment to wider society throughout people's lives. To achieve these objectives requires a step change, both in how colleges see themselves and how they are seen by policymakers and by the community, and in the policy and governance arrangements which enable and support them. Funding is important for sure, but much more is required. And it seems to me that it's really important that the Welsh Government continues, as we do recommend in the report, that it continues its work to develop the Commission for Tertiary Education and Research, CETER, which was recommended in the report that I did several years ago, which brings together the further and higher education systems together, creating a connected tertiary system and with a prominent place for colleges. That the Commission sets out a 10-year education and skills strategy. This should align with the other strategic priorities, being economic, industrial, social, cultural inclusion strategies, as well as the Future Generations Act and the Cymru 2050 strategy. That the Commission pursues the opportunities that come for shared services to ensure that there's a well-integrated, cohesive, sustainable, and high-quality offering, which is necessary to overcome gaps or disparities in provision between one part of Wales and the next, and also ensure that we have those opportunities spreading across Wales. Ultimately, public support is vital to understanding and supporting the benefits that can accrue from a strong, regionally networked, collaborative tertiary system. This requires good public engagement by everyone, and it needs to also involve all educational institutions, enterprise, local and regional authorities, and civic societies. I commend this report to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. And just before bringing Kathryn in, I think just looking at some of the chat and listening to what you said, then clearly you made some very clear recommendations in your report, as you said, a few years ago, I think it's about 5 years ago, on post-compulsory education and training. And you know, we've sort of in the Commission, that sort of trajectory has been supported through the work of the Commission. And I'm sure we're all interested to see what the views are of the people attending this afternoon in terms of whether there's agreement on that direction. I also noticed the comments that Jisk have been putting in around digital. And I'm particularly interested to know any views people have got about the role of digital moving forward for colleges as well. Okay. Kathryn, thank you very much for contributing to our report, along with Shavanah, and over to you now for the next section.
Yeah, David, thank you everyone. Just very grateful to be asked to contribute today on behalf of CBI Wales and businesses in Wales, and to mark the launch of this very important report. We know that business across Wales and beyond are facing unprecedented challenges, and that education, and colleges very much included in that, will play a key part in the success of business in the post-pandemic world. And that's equipping business with the skills and support that our people will need. And it's not just about colleges responding to recognised business needs. I was particularly taken with the stat in the report that 65% of children entering primary schools today will go on to do jobs that we don't yet know exist. Colleges can play a big part in helping with existing challenges, but also in helping businesses to drive change and innovate and better plan for that future workforce need. And the good news is that developments of the college system in recent years means that we already have a network of colleges in situ ready to make this happen. As the report rightly identifies, colleges also play a key role in regional skills partnerships. Businesses want to see even more college staff spend time with us, and that's part of strategic partnership, which is why the case for employer hubs is so welcome, and particularly, I think, for SMEs. Colleges also play a key role in regional regeneration, and the Commission's recommendation for a legal duty on governing bodies to consider this will be impactful. Digital infrastructure and lack of skills is a barrier to greater prosperity in Wales, which makes the recommendation for funding to support these areas crucial too. So as ever, as David said in his introduction, collaboration will be the key to delivery, and that's college collaboration with schools and universities, that's regional collaboration, and it's collaboration between businesses and employers as well by colleges. And at CBI Wales, on behalf of Business in Wales, we look forward very much to working with you to deliver that. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Kathryn. And I know that many of the colleges in Wales are members of the CBI and have been so for many years, with more and more joining. And I certainly think that joined up approach, and certainly we visited the CBI Wales Council meeting at Swansea about a year or so ago as part of our consultation in doing our work as a commission. So thank you very much for your contribution this afternoon. Okay, clearly from the people point of view, the trade unions play a really important role, and so alongside employers and everybody else, it's really important that we work in partnership with the TUC to realise the vision that we have. So Shavanah, it's a real pleasure for you to be with us this afternoon as well, and also thank you to you for your contribution. Over to you.
Diolch, David. And I'm just to say, I'm really pleased to have been asked to speak today at the launch of this report. I mean, I have witnessed firsthand the important role the colleges play in changing people's lives, and improving workplaces, of course, both from a personal perspective and a professional perspective as well. And from the difference I know that it's made, not only to my own life and that of family and friends, but also to the brilliant work that I've witnessed resulting from the extensive role that Welsh colleges have played in delivering the objectives of the union learning programmes in workplaces across the whole country. Widening participation and breaking down barriers to learning has been one of the key objectives contained in the Wales Union Learning Fund prospectus since its inception in 1999. Another of its key objectives states that union learning should be responsive to the emerging skills and employability needs of workers, helping to deliver the needs of both the current and the future workforce. So as you can see, much of the focus of this report actually resonates very strongly with us here at the Wales TUC. And we have, these have been much of our sort of guiding principles for many years now, and maybe even hundreds of years. So I wanted to speak a little bit about the widening participation and improving access to adult education is and always has been a significant priority for trade unions. And we know from our work in this area over the years that it has had a very positive impact on so much of the key day-to-day business. And there's clear evidence that access to education improves health and well-being, workplace safety, equality, job security, and actually workforce morale, for example, as well. And this results in better career progression and ultimately a positive impact on people's pay, terms and conditions too. And the benefits to workers and the impact on all of the things that trade unions traditionally hold dear are very, very clear. So you can see why the Wales TUC, we've always been quite, keen to be involved in any discussions that seek to make learning more accessible and fit for purpose too. Strengthening the voice of the individual in adult education is hugely important to us, and many of the recommendations contained in the report do seek to do just that. And I think it's fair to say that our adult education and skills system in Wales has over the years often been too focused on the employer and not enough on the individual. And whilst I would never say that the needs of the employers aren't absolutely key when considering the future of any system, we can and should actually be doing much more in partnership. And we have an opportunity here in Wales to shape the system through social partnership working and affording equal importance to the voice of government, employers and workers will help drive that greater social equity and deliver that more equal Wales that we all sign up to. And I would say that colleges play a massive role in this approach when it comes to adult learning, and this report in particular highlights that extremely well. For too many people, lifelong learning feels out of reach. Colleges have to be, much more accessible to every single person, no matter their age, their background, or their circumstance of life. And that's why I'm pleased to see that the recommendations from the Independent Commission on the College of the Future that would ensure commitment to lifelong learning with a right to student support, which meets the needs of people when they need it most. And it's not just for the benefits we know that they are for individuals, but widening that participation has a net benefit to the economy also, and improvements in productivity, plugging those skills gaps does lead to, increased profit and efficiency in the workplace. And this is important for Wales, especially now as we seek to recover from the mess that COVID has made of economies across the globe. Throughout the coronavirus pandemic, we have seen industries and jobs change and shift and adapt, of course. And Wales has suffered huge job losses, with some predictions suggesting that we may not see employment back to pre-COVID levels for anything between 4 or 5 years or even more. And additionally, we know that this particular crisis and the subsequent recession has exacerbated pre-existing inequalities. We're particularly concerned about the impact on women, on young people, and people from BME communities in particular are likely to face even worse scarring effects to their employment perspectives for many years to come. So our economic recovery will, in no small part, depend on colleges. And colleges, do engage those hard to reach and vulnerable people in a very unique and powerful way. And if we are going to be encouraging people to change their career paths, because there are some industries, particularly the creative industry, for example, the music industry, where we've had shut down altogether. They haven't yet had the opportunity to sort of have that opportunity to reopen at all. Those are the types of individuals as well that are looking to see what else they can be doing, what that new world of work is going to look like. So we need to get to people who are either unemployed, are potentially in that category, but also people who are in precarious employment into good quality jobs that then we can invest in, and wherever we can invest in, and where change is currently needed. The report highlights some very important things about how adult education can play an even bigger and broader role in delivering on key priorities on the future of work, and the challenges around the environment, digital innovation, automation are key areas for all unions. Last year, we published our report, A Green Recovery and a Just Transition, where we called for massive economic stimulus and set out a very clear plan to achieve a just transition to a net zero economy for workers and communities in Wales. And the challenges of automation in every workplace are very similar, but also quite different. And in effect, we can't simply wait for change to happen, Planning for that change through social partnership is how we can do this in a fair and more equitable and just way. And it's crucial that we take people and communities with us on that journey, and that we establish that, strong relationship between colleges, people and employers and unions. And that's going to be absolutely key in how we move this forward. It's evident that adult education is going to need to make changes to turn that into a reality. Digital, for example, was mentioned quite a bit in the chat, and we've seen this develop even in our own work through union-led learning in Wales. And we've noticed that the role of trade union learning reps has begun to change. This is a role that specifically seeks to reduce barriers to learning in the workplace and provide individuals with a voice on learning and development. And we're seeing more ULRs are involved in broader areas than they would have been previously. Decarbonisation, workplace well-being, equalities, for example, have all become central topics in delivering the learning agenda. Similarly, the Wales Union Learning Fund has seen an increase in funded activity in these areas over recent years by up to 40%. And this is, further evidence that adult education is actually a key driver to how work will look for us all in the future. And it's important to just sort of point out the learning should by no means only be linked to employment. It's also about fulfillment, and how we feel in the trade union movement, that our model can show that sort of way of working in some respect. Many of the progressive recommendations contained in the report reflect key elements of how we do things in the workplace, around informing developments at a sector and national level, everything around the individual voice, removing barriers and increasing participation, particularly for those who are extremely vulnerable and maybe from non-traditional groups as well, is how we're going to be successful in making learning a fair work issue. And crucially, that we underpin all of this with collective bargaining. We seek not just to support people to learn, but to sustain that in the longer term and embed that sort of work, embed those changes at a workplace cultural level through negotiation and social partnership. So I'd just like to, thank you again for inviting me on, just to say a couple of things, and just to mention, embedding fairness and sustainability into the system is not only about doing what is right for for us just now, but it's also it's extremely important for a society as a whole, and it will make us much more productive and benefit us economically, but also enrich us culturally. So I will leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Shavanah. Just before I bring Guy in, just, one thing I picked up from what you said then, it was a sort of also a theme, which was this issue around the individual and business. And certainly I fully support them personally. And I think they're not mutually exclusive things. And I think the trick is about colleges and others recognizing that those, if you can align those, it's a real win-win situation. And I think that's where the best examples show what can be done. The individual does not need to lose out because we're meeting the needs of business, or the other way around. But thank you very much for highlighting that point. Just before I bring Guy in, just a note, if anybody has got any questions, please start to put them through on the chat, because as soon as as Guy has made his input, we'll put some questions to the panel. Okay, pnawn da again, Guy, over to you.
Pnawn da, David. Diolch, and thanks very much for inviting me to contribute. I'm pretty certain that the Welsh FE sector is going to welcome the report of the Commission, and we'll see much in the recommendations which is music to our ears, which we will warm to. I'm also pretty certain that ColegauCymru is going to be echoing many of these recommendations and ideas in the asks which we will be putting towards parties in the run-up to the Senedd elections, with the proviso that you gave earlier, David, about assuming, of course, that the date stays. For me, the Commission has highlighted the central role that colleges can play in their communities. It's been a real pleasure to be involved in the work of the Commission. It's given me the opportunity to work with colleagues from the other 3 nations. And that's reinforced my view that our colleges in Wales are well placed to deliver the sorts of changes that the Commission identifies in this report. In Wales, colleges need to be seen as being central not just to upskilling and economic development, as valuable as that is, but we also need to be seen as drivers of change that benefits our communities, the communities that we serve, and that we should be seen as being the promoters of the cause of social justice. So for me, the recommendations contain things which are important for all of us to commit to as a society that wants better outcomes for all of our people. I'd highlight, for example, the first recommendation, establishing the right to lifelong learning. We know absolutely that life chances, health, well-being, and so on are all linked to educational attainment. And educational attainment at level 3 and above gives a much greater chance of lifelong prosperity and job security. Recommendation 11 paints a picture of the huge value of colleges as anchor institutions in their communities. And it points to our unique legislation that we have in Wales in the form of the Future Generations Act and how that should be extended through our sector. And recommendation 8, which reflects on colleges forming hubs for employers and driving forward the support that we give to businesses and how we should be developing level 4 and level 5 vocational provision. So I think there's a huge amount in the report of great value to our sector. I'd say to all of the attendees, just look at the case studies that are cited in the Wales report to get a glimpse of the absolutely fantastic work that colleges are doing now. But it also paints a picture of the potential for us to grow and develop further. And yes, we face challenges. We face huge challenges. We face the challenges of recovery from COVID. We thought that we were going to be facing the challenges of Brexit. Somehow Brexit appears to have disappeared off the agenda in the face of the pandemic. And yeah, the report highlights the challenges of securing stable funding for our staff to keep pace with ever-changing technology, for leadership to be up to the task of delivering the strategic change which the Commissioner has identified. But all 4 nations share these same challenges. But I'm confident in our people, in our sector, and I believe that our sector in Wales is well placed to face those challenges. So just to draw to an end, David, I'd say fundamentally, the work of the Commission, I think, has shown that in the area of public policy, we need a wider interpretation and a wider understanding of what colleges do and what skills and skill development is all about. We are more than a force for economic growth. Colleges should be rightly seen as being at the heart of their communities, working to reduce inequality and building social resilience. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, Guy, thank you very much. So there's a few questions that are going to come up, and I'm going to try to avoid answering them myself if possible, and try and get the panelists to answer them, so I'm going to pick them carefully. And the first question I'm going to pick up on, and I think it's the panelists who can probably see these on the chat. It's come from ex-colleague Mark Dacey. Good afternoon, Mark. Thank you for your question. I assume there's only one Mark Dacey. And I'll read it out in case others can't see it. It is really encouraging to listen to the positive comments about FE and the central role that FE will have in the key priorities around economic stimulus and recovery. I am myself a product of FE and agree wholeheartedly, although always there's an however. How will a tertiary commission make sure that FE does not continue with a misguided perception that it is less important than schools and HE in some quarters, a factor that we deal with every day? I'm just going to try and get a couple of panelists maybe to come back to respond to this, and perhaps the obvious starting point maybe to ask Ellen if you have a response to that.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks very much, Mark, for your question, because I think if I was to say or make a general comment, I think this is further education's time. I think this is the time, that period, if I could say historic time, where there is an increasing recognition of the importance of further education, or let me say VET or TVET, as it widely called this whole notion that we have spent a lot of time increasing, quite rightly, participation in higher education, but have spent too little time thinking about people who aren't in higher ed, in university, but also beyond that, the comment of lifelong learning and the notion that as we get older, as I look at this myself from my little perch, it is the ability of people to move in and out of education throughout their lifetimes, not just as a course that you do just when you finish or you do a course, but it is what makes the institutions themselves flexible, and there are implications for colleges. So what's the role of the Commission? I think there's an increasing view that by bringing the system together, and here I'm talking about the tertiary, the post, in the Welsh case, a post-16 system together, you have a much greater opportunity for conversations across what are seen as big divides, avoiding what are unnecessary predatory behaviors, certainly chasing down students for the sake of students, looking at sharing facilities, looking at developing, there's a question about learner pathways with respect, I think it's, I forget who raised this about, from the OU, raised that question of how do we ensure that students can move, or let me call it again, quite rightly, learners can move through the system in a much more fluid way, as opposed to being caught up either with one institution or one bilateral. And I think we need to embrace a much more innovative, holistic approach to education and learning across our different circumstances, needs, and indeed, you know, parts of the region and so on. There are implications for colleges as we go forward, but I think this would be a good start.
Thanks, Ellen. Certainly when I worked in the sector, there was a word sometimes used to describe the sector, which I used to try not use. I'm going to use today. It starts with a C. It's Cinderella. And I think in some ways, we're going to stop using it. I just have, but that's sort of behind Mark's question. I'm just interested, before moving on to the next question, Kathryn, from your point of view as somebody in business, because what we got from Mark then, Guy and I would agree, I think, by looking at our body language, there's a view sometimes that FE is not treated fairly and the same. From an employer perspective, how do you see it? Do you think it's unfair, or are we worried about the wrong thing?
I think it's horses for courses, and I think it's all about the training and whether it's relevant to the job. So I think that element of snobbery is becoming less and less relevant. It's have you had the appropriate training for the job? And if you're best placed to do that and you come with the right attitude, I think there's more of a blurring of the lines than there was historically. It is my perception.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm going to move on to a different question. And I think what we will do also, because what we will promise to do is to come back on the questions after the meeting where we haven't been able to respond. There's one here about, it says, in the light of the report's outcomes, is it time to revisit the idea of a more fundamentally formalised role for governors in respect of the community, perhaps along the lines recommended by the Humphreys review in 2011. I don't know if it's Mr. Humphreys who's asked the question. I don't think so. But anyway, who wants to come back on? Guy, is that something you can come in on, and possibly then Shavanah?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, David. I'm not personally convinced it is the right time to revisit a whole structure of governance in further education. What I would say is, I think there is a need for the sector to be open to observations from the outside, and clearly we need transparency. If we're going to go through the sort of challenges and the sort of change which the Commission is identifying in this report, then we need to be communities which in ourselves reflect the diversity of those who we serve. So I think that can be achieved in a number of different ways, not just through governance. Personally, I actually think what has been said about future generations and the PSB structure and all of that plays into this as well, in terms of opening our institutions to more of a public gaze. And I also think, I'm just going to go back to the previous question, David, because I think it connects to that as well. I think there's a large section of society that doesn't see colleges as automatically belonging to them or being for their children and their young people. And I think we have to overcome that.
Okay. Shavanah, do you want to come in on this one or the previous question?
Yeah, I think that the idea of having a big review of governance structures and everything might be a big exercise at this moment in time, because obviously the focus really now is on keeping people in their jobs, but also preparing for that future world of work. But I do think that there is a need for any sort of governance structures that currently exist, regardless of what structure or sector. There is a real commitment from Welsh Government to make sure that the boards are much more diverse. So there is, much more of that sort of ask that currently exists and practice that should be embedded. But equally, for me, it is about this needs to be connected into the bigger conversations that are currently taking place around the recovery programme at a regional basis, and the discussions that take place around how, for example, how do we create that circular economy in Wales? Therefore, where are some of those skills gaps? We've been doing we're doing some work with YouGov at the moment. We're doing a series of polling, and there was some conversations, interestingly, that we had last night with young people. Some of them were students, and many of them were currently in work. And colleges was mentioned quite a bit. And for example, one of the things that came up was, in the same way as you have financial support that you can tap into to apply for university, how come we can't have similar things for colleges a bit better than we currently do? But equally, there's lots of aspects around the sort of the wider socio-economic factors as well. Can people actually afford to do the courses that they genuinely want to do if they're currently not in work, for example? What exactly are colleges offering us? So I think that, again, colleges have got to let themselves be much more open to scrutiny, but it's not necessarily always just the governors that have a role to play here. I think there's something a bit more wider here.
Thank you. And that answers another question that had come through separately around, to a point at least, with student enrolment from the NUS. I'm going to move on to another question that we've got here, which is, as we move forward, there will be lots of new challenges for colleges to deal with, including trying to anticipate the jobs of the future. To balance this, are there any old things, I suppose current things perhaps, that colleges are doing that could usefully be phased out? I'll give you the first go with that one, Guy. And then if anybody else on the panel wants to come in, I can do so.
Thank you for that, David. I'm not sure I see it in that sense that it's about new things coming in and old things going out the back door. Although I do remember the days from very, very early on in my career where there were rooms full of typewriters and we taught people how to type. Well, we don't do that anymore. I think there's a more fundamental challenge underpinning this question, which is about digital transformation and the role of digital technology across everything. I think the challenges to colleges in terms of curriculum development and being responsive to employers and being employer-led, because that gives people the ability to access good jobs and good quality jobs, means that there's a much wider issue for the workforce and for curriculum designers to embrace the digital revolution and ensure that that permeates all areas of the curriculum. So in my college, for example, we're doing an interesting piece of work looking at the health and care curriculum and the way in which digital technology is going to transform training in that area. So that would be my answer to that question, David.
Yeah. Ellen?
Sorry, yeah, maybe I might come on the back of what Guy has said, and maybe also put it up to the issue of colleges being perhaps more flexible. I mean, not just to pick on the colleges, the universities are in the same boat. So it's the question across the whole education system, but certainly in regard to this, colleges being more flexible in their delivery, the types of delivery. If we're looking at a much more diverse set of learners, of all types of people, You know, so Shavanah mentioned women coming back into and wanting to retrain after raising children or later, or people wanting to look. The kinds of structures that are set out are very much, this is what we offer, you come and take what we offer, and that's it. And we really need to move towards a much more flexible learning format, and indeed opening our facilities in a much more flexible way, all year round, all week long, all kinds of ways. So there are big changes across the board if we're really serious about lifelong learning.
It's an interesting point that flows from that, which picks up a couple of other things that have been said. So clearly since last March and all of the lockdowns that have happened, we've all got used to things like this. And we haven't said to anybody this afternoon, you're muted yet. I'm sure somebody will help us in a minute, probably me. But you know, the reality is at the moment is that learners in our schools and colleges and universities are having a bad deal, aren't they? In my view, anyway, because of the circumstances, they're losing so much. But when we do get through this, they would have had an experience of something different. So I would argue that we can't really go back to what we had last February because they've tasted something else. I'm not saying it's what they want all the time, but they might want something else. I wonder if they've got any views on how that impacts on us, because picking up what Ellen said about practice, almost your 24/7 college, not needing to attend college all the time, being able to learn remotely. Clearly a load of issues here around context of employment potentially, but in reality, things I think, I'm looking at Shavanah when I do this, clearly the workforce in colleges, we need to look at what is expected of them when things have changed so much, the tools they're given, but also the expectations of them have changed as well. And Shavanah, do you want to come in on that one? It's
I mean,
a range of things.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting time for trade unions actually, because we have had to switch the way that we provide trade union education. So everything all of a sudden overnight went digital. And it was interesting because for many of our tutors had never done it before. So it was overnight learning, but they have done it brilliantly. And it has been excellent in that we have seen more women joining in and signing up and doing courses online. We've seen more part-time workers. We've had a range of different sectors actually that we hadn't previously been able to tap into, who were union members, either signing up to do courses online or sort of attend webinars and engage much more digitally. But we have been talking about what we do in the future when hopefully everyone's vaccinated and we have some sort of a normal return. Although I think we need to learn lessons, do some of the good stuff, but equally balance it off, because I think sitting in front of a screen all day long is quite difficult. Not everyone can work from home or has the space to work from home as well. So I don't think that face-to-face will ever go away or will ever not be needed, but it is going to be about an accessibility and trying to have that sort of, you know, real balance there. But I think that having a digital offering has actually worked you know, wonders in a way.
Thank you, Kathryn. Did you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it just reflects really the great thought process that we're going through in the work environment as well, and looking what future work will look like post-pandemic. And I can see, you know, exactly the same strains in the education sector as well. And I think what we're all coming to the conclusion is, surprise, surprise, it will be a hybrid solution. And, you know, offices are not dead. People want supervision, engagement, social development, all of those things they will need on site. And I can see that from an education perspective as well. I think historically, pre-pandemic, if you were dialing into a meeting remotely, you had an inferior experience. What we need to work on now is how post-pandemic there's a flexibility so that we are able to accommodate from a technology, but also an etiquette perspective as to how we make sure that whether you're in the room or dialing in remotely, there's no preference, and also to make sure that as far as possible there's a balance. you've got face-to-face interaction, but you've also got that flexibility to make sure that if it doesn't need to be face-to-face, let's not all waste our time and energy and kill the environment along the way where we don't need to.
Yeah, it's a good point, Kathryn. I think in the way you used the word hybrid there, and I think Ian Price has used the same word on the chat here, is that I think from a college point of view, the term blended is used a lot when we come to talking about learning. It's that mix, and it's in many ways, I think it's about taking the opportunities that come out of the challenge here and realizing we can do things a bit differently, and some things are not here to stay, but some things perhaps are here. I'm going to bring things to a conclusion fairly shortly. I think, Sian, have you got to leave us at this point or not?
Yes. I was just putting a message in the chat box. Yeah, I just wanted to say a massive diolch and thank you for having me join the panel. It's been really good, and I look forward to working with you all again in the future. I've just got to log into a meeting with the Minister. Sorry. So
thank you. And I think the other thing is we'll pick up, and again, I know all the panelists can see the questions and importantly the comments that are on there. I don't know if everybody who's watching in can see it, but some really useful stuff here that I'm talking to Lewis and Philippa. We need to try and pick up and play back to everybody who's taken the time to get involved this afternoon. Yes, there's positive things there in terms of reinforcing things that people like or don't like, and some ideas, but also picking out some important questions and themes in terms of how we can deal with things. I'm going to just pick up one more question that came through yesterday. In fact, it was the first question we received, so I think it'd be remiss of me not to answer it. I think it was the first one received, and it was one around the Welsh language, and it came from Anna Davis at Gower College, Swansea, which was, where do you see Welsh language in a college of the future for Wales? And I think, you know, if you look at the UK-wide report and also the Wales report, they reference the ambitions we have in Wales for increasing the number of learners by 2050 and all that goes with that. And I think what I would say is that it's about embedding everything to do with the Welsh language, what Estyn used to call the Welsh dimension, into all that we do. And, you know, looking at Guy here, you're one of the colleges that have got a Welsh for Adults centre. I know Coleg Cambria has as well. It's about, I think, leveraging what that brings to your institution, and universities have them as well to do that. But also it's something that Wales do really well, which I think, and I think it's one of the things we do better than perhaps certain parts of the UK, which is working together. And we've got to get away from the silo approach, which I think even more, which I think we do already. But it is really pleasing to see that, you know, on this afternoon's event, we've got the Iwerddon involved, we've got Coleg Cenedlaethol involved, and the Welsh Language Commissioner's Office as well. And I think it's about tapping in this country and not trying to do everything for ourselves, but recognizing that other people have got a role to play, and they really want to play a part in that as well. So, Guy, did you want to add anything on that one? If not, I'm going to bring it to a conclusion.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there, David. The only point I would add is I think it's about us finding more and more flexible ways to embed the language into our practice. And I'm thinking in particular, David, around things like allowing learners the opportunity to do some assessment through the medium of Welsh, which falls short of the delivery of a whole programme through the medium of Welsh. Because I think for a lot of learners, very often college can be a place where they can rebuild confidence in the use of the language, and they can extend their use of the language. And I think we need to respond to those sorts of challenges as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly in one of the things I do at the moment as the chair of Qualifications Wales, that's a key part of the strategy that we launched as Qualifications Wales last week. And I know we've got, I think, Rachel Heath-Davis from Qualifications Wales, who's again in on this afternoon's event, which shows the level of commitment that we have as part of an approach which everyone has a role to play. Okay, I am going to bring things to conclusion now, just really quickly. First of all, can I just thank contributors this afternoon? Shavanah's gone, but thank you very much, Kathryn, Ellen and Guy for your input. And of course, to everyone who's attended this virtually today. I'd also like to thank Lewis Cooper and Philippa Olway, who've been involved with the Commission, doing all the work behind the scenes, and also to David Cragg, who I think is in on this afternoon. And also thanks David Hughes, Chief Executive of the AOC, and all his colleagues for all the other things they've done to support the work of the Commission at a UK level, but also supported things at the Wales level as well. So now's the time for action. There have been some important questions and comments made about the timing of this report, and hopefully it can help with the upcoming elections in Wales. Hopefully this isn't the end of the line, it's just one sort of stopping off point. I'd encourage people to go on to the website for the Commission, which is collegecommission.co.uk. You're there, you'll find more background, you'll find more about the work of the Commission, the members and various reports and so on. And we'd encourage you to continue to be involved. It's sort of the end of the line for us as commissioners today, and for some people over the next couple of weeks. But in terms of the work of the 4 nations, I know that the colleges and the representative bodies don't see this at the end of the line. It's something they want to can do. We can operate as devolved countries, but also we can operate working together, I think, as devolved countries with really important FE and college systems. So all the contact details are on the Commission's website. And as I said, we'd love to hear from you and how we take forward our vision. So diolch yn fawr pawb am cyfrannu. Mae'n ddrwg fod fi heb gallu codi pob un o'r cwestiynau. And thank you for your contributions. I'm sorry you haven't been able to pick up on all of the questions, but they're really, really helpful. And we will not lose information that's been presented this afternoon. And we'll find the right way of playing all that back to the people who've given their valuable time this afternoon to contribute. So diolch yn fawr iawn, and enjoy the rest of your day. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch.
Thank you.
Thank you.